I would say, what is the purpose? Again, the Bible tells us. Moses' whole goal in life is to liberate the Jews from Egyptian slavery and to lead us in the promised land. But Moses never gets to the promised land. So what lesson can we draw from that? Set for yourself a goal that's in service of others that you will not be able to achieve in your lifetime, and you'll have to pass on to your children. So it's find a purpose, and that purpose will be in serving others.
I'm excited, actually, to have this conversation, Mark, on many levels, because you've had so much impact on the world. You've been part of all sorts of ventures that we're going to talk about. But the reason I'm excited is because we've had lots of private conversations. Last time I was with you, I was in New York. We were having Shabbat dinner. And so I guess what's happening is we're inviting people in on a conversation that maybe we might have had privately. And I don't want to assume people know too much. So I wanted to start at the beginning. I want us to rewind a little bit. And I wanted to find out, when you were growing up, what was it like growing up in your household? And when exactly, or what signs did you see growing up that sort of gave you the impression that you might be a Torah teacher or an entrepreneur? Sort of talk to me a bit about sort of the early days.
So I had an incredible upbringing, a really perfect childhood in Short Hills, New Jersey. So I grew up in suburban New Jersey in the 70s and 80s. I was born in 1972, and it was an idyllic storybook upbringing. Wonderful family, wonderful community. Everything about it was great. Religiously, we went to a Reform synagogue. So I was brought up a Reform Jew, and Reform Jews in the 80s and even today, they didn't have much Torah instruction, not much Torah knowledge, not much Torah teaching. I mean, I remember even being in nursery school and just, I still remember the songs from nursery school and just having instilled in me a love of Judaism that stayed with me. And perhaps that is the most important function of any religious education. But I certainly did not have anything approaching a formal religious education in Torah, Bible, or anything like it. And I think actually that lack of a formal religious education helped prepare me to write God Was Right, because God Was Right, the title is God Was Right, How Modern Social Science Proves the Torah is True. So I come to the Torah, I come to the Bible, or what Christians call the Old Testament, from a rationalist standpoint. I don't come from a pious tradition. So I don't come with the assumption that the Bible's true, the Bible's right. I come to it as a rationalist. And what I discovered as a rationalist from quite outside the pious tradition, I'm not in the pious tradition now. I mean, what I discovered as a rationalist, looking at the Bible as a rationalist does, as a secular person might, so I read the Bible that way. And I discovered reading the Bible that way, which is who I am as a rationalist, is that the Bible is absolutely right and true in all of its claims. Perhaps ironically, the lack of formal religious training, instruction, education growing up really helped prepare me to write God Was Right.
So, I mean, that's interesting. So from what you're saying, you grew up in this sort of rich, maybe you had a rich religious sort of context around you, would you say? I mean, a part of me wonders, when you were growing up, did you believe the stuff you were being taught? Did it feel like you were just being instructed in sort of family tradition? How did you interact with faith when you were really young?
It's the kind of reform upbringing in suburban New Jersey in the 1980s was, I remember, probably, almost 50 years ago, loving my earliest introductions to Judaism in nursery school. That was, of course, through songs and food. And then, but in terms of like formal religious rituals, I mean, of course, I had a bar mitzvah, and we went to synagogue on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the high holidays. But I did not go to Jewish day school, did not go to Jewish high school, went to Hebrew school, but that was 1 or 2 hours a week. So the kind of Jewish upbringing that people like me had in suburban New Jersey and probably suburban everywhere in the Reform context in the 80s, 70s, I'm sure even today, it's nothing approaching kind of a formal, systematic, traditional Jewish education, nothing like that at all. So I came to the love of Torah around 20 years ago when I realized that the Torah, the Bible, is just a completely interesting book. It's totally fascinating. And the Torah, I realized it addresses all of the questions, challenges, conflicts, opportunities that everyone's facing today. And it does so in the most interesting ways. And I realized that the more you read the Torah, the more you love the Torah. And the more you love the Torah, the more you want to read it even more. So it becomes a virtuous cycle. But that was a discovery I made around 20 years ago. I'm 52 right now.
I ask because, of course, a lot of people listening and watching maybe, didn't grow up in a sort of religious, don't have a religious background. I certainly remember going to church pretty much every Sunday. And if I wasn't going to go to church, I had to have an extremely good reason why I wasn't going to go.
What was a good reason?
Well, maybe I had like a competition or like a sort of sports thing. But even then it would be like, okay, a one-off, right? You just had to go. You just had to go in. But if I'm honest, I grew up, I was one of those odd kids. I was reading Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris. I wouldn't call myself a new atheist, but I definitely did not believe the claims being made in my church were actually true. I just thought that these are all really good. And to be fair, there was a table tennis table in the church, which is, that was half the reason I enjoyed being there.
Well, that's great. In the Jewish context, we refer to a synagogue as a Beit Knesset, which means house of gathering, as distinct from a Beit Tefillah, which is a house of prayer. So we want houses of gathering where one of the reasons why you would go to synagogue, or in your case, Mike, church, is because there's table tennis, or that's where your community is. That's great. But I would say, the way you describe your experience is it's very Torah based, because the central words of the Torah, the middle words, those which separate the first half of the Torah from the second half of the Torah, are inquire insistently. Right in the middle of Leviticus, inquire insistently. So I think what the Torah is telling us is inquire insistently. It's the middle words. It's the center. So at the center of the Torah, literally, it says inquire insistently. And that's what you were doing. You were inquiring insistently. And that's what I was doing in a very different context. I started older than you did. I mean, I started really studying Torah in my 30s, but I come to it from a rationalist, non-pious tradition. And I inquired insistently, and I still inquire insistently. And the more I inquired, the more I continue to inquire, the more I realized the Torah is true, and true in its own reading. So what does that mean? It means the first question you have to ask about any book, including perhaps especially the Bible, is what is the genre? What kind of book is this? And a lot of people get this wrong. And because the Bible is not a history book, it's not a science book, it's not a cookbook, it's a guidebook. And the Bible makes hundreds, maybe thousands of claims of guidance about from what we should wear in the morning to how many times we should go out with a girl or a boy before we decide to marry him or her, to how we should educate our children, to what kind of grandparents we should be, to how do I find meaning in my work, tons of guidance. And that's what the Bible is. And it's not just me saying this, it's Moses saying it. Moses says in Deuteronomy 29, this book is written for your benefit. In other words, it's a self-help book. So, and God was right. And generally, I inquire insistently and say, well, is the guidance offered in the Torah true, false, or true in some cases, and maybe anachronistic in others? And what I found is that it's true in every case.
And I'm looking forward to diving deep into some of the central claims in the Torah and how you interpret it. Just, again, zooming in a tiny bit to your 20s and your 30s. And again, this is important for our listeners and those who are watching, because I'm interested to know what part or how the learnings and the Torah, how you were raised, how did that influence the decisions you made as per your career? Because you've moved between law, into business and media. I mean, you've kind of moved around a bit. I just wondered, in that period where, if we're honest, a lot of young people struggle with their purpose, their calling, what am I meant to do? There's this Gen Z stat which says that most Gen Zs within 2 years want to move industries, right? Because they just sort of sometimes don't have a guiding principle in terms of how to choose and how to think about work. For you, when you were 20 and 30, what did that journey look like as you navigated different industries?
Oh, yeah, I mean, I went to college, Williams College, graduated in 94, and then I taught high school at an inner city school in Jersey City. And after that, I went to law school at Yale, but I never practiced as a lawyer. In fact, I failed the bar. But I had started my first business, Gerson Lammer Group GLG, which I co-founded in 1998. And I started that in 1998, GLG in 1998, and I started getting, and I wasn't really studying Torah at that point, but I started getting involved with two charitable or philanthropic enterprises pretty early on, and maybe well, not in '98, but pretty early on, by the very early 2000s. One was United Hatzalah of Israel, which I co-founded and still very actively and proudly chair. And United Hatzalah of Israel is Israel's crowdsourced system of volunteer first response. The problem that we solve is that when you call the Israeli equivalent of 911, I'm not sure what the number is, the emergency number is in England, but there's got to be an emergency number. Whatever the emergency number is, it will take 10 minutes for an ambulance to get to you in the most advanced cities. And this is true for London, New York, Tel Aviv. The most advanced cities takes 10 minutes. If the emergency workers have to get upstairs to an apartment building or an office, add another 4. At which point, if the victim is choking, bleeding, having a heart attack, stroke, he's dead. So the response time is too long for emergencies. So the insight that my partner in United Hatzalah, the great Eli Beer, had as a very young man was that following a trauma, you don't need an ambulance. You need a trained and equipped first responder. You need someone there immediately. He said initially within 3 minutes, but now we've sped it up to within 90 seconds.
Wow.
So United Hatzalah of Israel, which I co-founded with Eli and I chair, we now have 8,000 volunteers throughout the country, Jews of all kinds, Christians, Muslims, men, women, everybody. And what we do is we have a GPS, of course, enabled system. We have equipped all the medics. Well, we train all the medics, and then we equip them with everything they might need in an emergency, from a birthing kit to a burn kit to a defibrillator. And what we do is we locate the closest trained and equipped first responder, who may be a guy having dinner across the street from you, or maybe someone working in the office 2 floors above, so that when there's an emergency, we can identify the closest responder who can get to you within the 90 seconds or 3 minutes that often separate life from death. So I co-founded that early on. I also was really blessed in college to have met my closest friend from college, Dr. John Fielder, and John called me when he graduated the residency program at Johns Hopkins, and he said, as you know, I am a Christian. And at that point, actually, I didn't know what it meant to be a Christian. And now I understand there's a big difference between being a Christian and just being a Gentile. Because if you're a Jew, you're born a Jew, and you're a Jew no matter what you do or say. You're a Jew. But when someone says I am a Christian, now I realize how powerful and meaningful that statement is. So he said, I'm a Christian, and he said, as a Christian, I feel called to go serve those who are being really ravaged by HIV and AIDS in Africa. And so he went over to Africa in 2002 as a Christian missionary physician, serving in Kenya to treat those who were at that point in Africa being ravaged by HIV and AIDS. And I started supporting his work early on because, the impact that John, as a Christian missionary physician, was able to have in ameliorating the pain and saving the lives of so many was astonishing per dollar invested, astonishing. And then, so one thing that we learned, or really John learned and taught me, is that the biggest humanitarian problem in the world is the lack of access to pretty much any kind of care for almost everybody in Africa. And that's whether you're a woman and you need a C-section, or you're a kid and you get hurt playing and you break your arm or your leg, or anything. And there's just, but who's providing the care? So John, the people providing the quality care are Christian missionary doctors at Christian hospitals in Africa. And so he said, let's start African Mission Healthcare, which we did in 2010, to partner with Christian missionary doctors at Christian hospitals in Africa to provide clinical care, to build infrastructure, to do training, and sometimes even hospital administration. So that's African Mission Healthcare. So I was really fortunate to be able to develop this kind of deep meaning and purpose, being able to see that when charitable dollars are deployed well, just how much pain they can ameliorate and how many lives they can save and how many opportunities for the poor they can create. So I was very fortunate to be even blessed to be able to have those two opportunities introduced to me pretty young, and be able to continue to grow and sustain them as I've gotten older.
I mean, Mark, it's really hard to sort of really capture just how much impact you've had through those two organizations. I mean, it's colossal. These are gigantic organizations doing great work. A part of me wonders, and again, this section of our conversation where we're trying to understand the connection between your reading and study of the Torah, or even upbringing in the Torah, and the work you do. It's for me, it's fascinating because I always wonder, when people do really great things, I always wonder, are they people who have a philosophy and then they really work in that philosophy, get it watertight, and then live their life, sort of screening opportunities through that philosophy? Or are they just people who just get on with it and just sort of make things happen, or are sort of pragmatists and just work it out? If you had to sort of pick which one you were you sort of, an opportunity presents itself, you just make it work? Or did you have a guidance philosophy that sort of colors and directs all the work and all the opportunities you say yes to?
I think it's a phenomenal question, really, dichotomy that you lay out. And I would say that, and I'll talk not about me, but about what the Torah would say. Because, you should never wait for a watertight philosophy or watertight anything. You should always be learning and growing. So and never wait to do good. Never wait. There's a great expression in Jewish teaching which derives from the Torah that says, the deeds of the righteous are done immediately. And so wait for nothing and nobody to do the right thing. And this is a great Jewish teaching from the Ramchal, who was a 17th century Italian sage, but it derives right from the story of Abraham and Sarah. When Abraham and Sarah are greeted by angels, look, the angels are in no rush. Abraham is outside waiting it says in the heat of the day, midday. Abraham had just been circumcised, but he's waiting outside. Why would he be waiting outside? Only one reason why he'd be waiting outside: to see if anybody comes by who needs help. So these three people come by. It turns out they're not just people, but they're angels. We can get into that. But anyway, it turns out they're angels, but they're in no rush. Like, they have nowhere to go. They're just wandering through the desert. And yet Abraham instructs Sarah and his servant, and he does it himself too. It's the word hurry is used 6 times in that passage. They hurried to get provisions for these angels/men. And I don't think anybody should wait for a watertight philosophy. I think people should just start doing, which is another Torah concept, because and I have this in the book, God Was Right, in the chapter on character change, because a lot of people have the mistaken notion that characters can't change. And I cite this in the science section of the book, the social science section of the book. It's actually called the end of history fallacy. The end of history fallacy is fascinating. In surveys, people say, I'm not going to change from here on, but I've changed a lot in the last 10 years, which is right, which is illogical, because, no matter what point you're saying that, you've acknowledged you've changed in the last 10 years. And I cite the country song from Hank Williams Jr., which is "All My Rowdy Friends Have Settled Down." Now, it's a great song, but probably 0 people heard that song and said, "Oh my God, that's amazing. His rowdy friends settled down. How did that happen?" No, because people were rowdy at one point, and then they settle down. We know characters change. Then the question is, well, how do characters change? And the Jewish teaching is quite explicit about that. It says, if one wants to change his character, then just start doing the thing you want. So if one says, "Oh, I wish I was more giving or more generous," don't plunge the depths of your psychology to figure out why you're not as giving and generous as you might be. Just give more today than you did yesterday. Then give more on Saturday than you did today, and more on Sunday. And just every day do the thing. And then what the Talmud says, it says that within slightly over a month, that characteristic will have become a part of you. But you got to keep doing it.
This is a very popular sort of thing you kind of read in self-help books. This idea of, young people sometimes love affirmations, right? Positive affirmations, and one of the problems with affirmations sometimes is it's like you're trying to convince yourself of something that's not true. Whereas if you show your doubtful mind your choices and the hard work and the kind of repeated actions you've taken, that's irrefutable proof, right? That you're trying to change. And so rather than spending energy trying to convince yourself you're something, show yourself the hard work, prove it through your repeated behaviors and decisions.
And your phrase is perfect. Repeated behaviors. Exactly. Repeated behaviors. And by the way, the Talmud and modern social science are only in disagreement about how much time it takes for repeated behavior to become part of you. And the amount of the difference is 1 month. So the scientists say it takes 66 days, whatever. It's like within, and even if the science is right, it's not 33 days, it's 60 something days. Within 2 months, you can have that characteristic a part of you. So yeah, I don't like the affirmations. Just start doing the thing repeatedly, and then it will become part of you. In other words, fake it till you make it. If you fake it, you will make it. And this happens for good things and bad things, by the way. If someone does a bad thing over and over again, that bad thing becomes a part of them. And if someone does a good thing over and over again, that good thing becomes a part of them. So if someone wants to develop a new characteristic, the Jewish teaching deriving from the Torah is very clear. Just start doing the thing. As you said, Mike, repeat.
Can we double click really quickly on one of those organizations, whether it's the Gerson Lehrman Group or it's United Hatzalary's African Mission Healthcare? I mean, again, could you give us a sense of the scale of some of these organizations? And now I want to double click and just find out what are some of the resistances or the difficulties, you found trying to scale and build these organizations? Because yes, I'm sure you made lots of good decisions, you and your co-founders, but I mean, there's no way it was easy. So give us a sense of just what it was like trying to grow and scale. And also, for those who are listening who haven't heard of them, I mean, give us a sense of just how much work they do, how big they are, so on and so forth.
GLG, thankfully, has become a large company, which is great because we're able to serve so many clients. Our clients are many of the major investment firms, consulting firms, corporations, other professional services firms. And what we do is when our clients want to make a better business or investment decision, they come to us and we arrange for them to consult with, either through surveys or on the phone or at events or other ways with real experts in the space, whatever the space is. And so that's GLG. It's become a very good-sized company. Proud and happy about that. And United Hatzalah of Israel, we now have up from zero. We now have 8,000 volunteers throughout the country, all of whom are trained EMTs or paramedics, very rigorous training. And why does the training have to be rigorous? Because the volunteer, you never know what you're going to have to deal with. I mean, maybe the call is from a woman who has a difficult birth, but she's not going to be able to make it to the hospital in time. Or maybe it's a car accident, or maybe it's a child choking, maybe it's an adult choking, maybe it's someone having a heart attack, maybe it's somebody drowning. Could be anything. Maybe it's someone having an allergic reaction to something pretty serious. No matter what it is, our medic has to be prepared to deal with it immediately and well. And so we have 8,000 volunteers. We're doing right now about 2,300 calls a day. So all day, every day, our volunteers are active, getting to their neighbors in need and rendering that life-saving care. African Mission Healthcare, we now have several dozen hospital partners in countries all throughout East and Central Africa. And I would say, what are the challenges? Let's just talk about African Mission Healthcare, because that one, the specific challenge there really relates directly to the Bible. So the thing the Bible tells us most often to do, or there are really two. One is do not fear, which is important, but that's not the focus of this. The other is love the stranger. And that's told in a variety of ways, but to love the stranger. So why would the Bible tell us to love the stranger so many times? From Exodus on through Deuteronomy, so many times tells us to love the stranger. Well, the Bible never tells us to do something that's easy, obvious, or that we would do anyway. The Bible never tells, there's no commandment in the Bible, thou shalt love thy children. So why is there no commandment? Because everyone's going to do it without any help or any instruction. So the Bible the Bible is a victory of what's right over what's natural. Probably the worst moral argument in the world is, I did it, or even worse, I'm going to do it because it's natural. When someone says it, it's like, whoa, stop. Like, if it's natural, you got to think about it. Maybe you really shouldn't do it. Lots of things that are natural are bad, and in comes the Bible and helps us to identify those things and to act in accordance with what's right rather than what's natural. So the Bible tells us to love the stranger many times because it's really hard to do. There are two natural reactions to the stranger. One is so well articulated in Adam Smith's Wealth of Nations, which is one reaction to the stranger is just to ignore him. Right, just to ignore him. Say, he's far, he's remote, I don't know him, so therefore I'm not going to think about him. one common natural reaction. Well, I'll get to the other one, and I'll get to a concern about that. And the other natural reaction to the stranger, we see that in the root of in the word barbarian. The word barbarian is, I believe it was from the ancient Greek, and it meant a stranger from out of town or something like that. So our natural reactions to the stranger are to ignore or to fear him. And in comes the Bible and says, how about neither? How about we love the stranger? And the Bible tells us, you shall love the strangers because you were strangers in the land of Egypt. So the Bible tells us to love the stranger. So at our work in African mission healthcare, from the perspective of the donors, and I would just encourage, nobody should ever think or say it's only money. I mean, without money, the Christian missionary doctors in Africa that we work with, and these are the best people in the world. These are sacred people living like God dreams that we could live. I mean, these are the best people in the world. But what they'll each say is, and the Volunteers United Hatzalah, who are such incredible, magnificent people who are willing to drop anything and everything to help a neighbor in need, what they'll both say is, without donors, we'd be working with Band-Aids. In other words, we'd be completely ineffective. So it is a challenge so the best ROI in the world, the best return investment in the world is money in the hands of a Christian missionary physician in Africa serving the patients. I mean, I go through the numbers and it's just staggering as to really for the cost of 1.5, literally between 1 and 2 operations in the United States, significant ones, but 1 and 2 operations in the United States, we run whole hospitals serving 2 million people in parts of Africa. So
Wow.
the ROI is spectacular, and we can go through the numbers, but if anyone's interested, just email me. It's spectacular. But so what's the challenge? I mean, usually people run to great ROI, like certainly in business they do. But the challenge is loving the strangers hard. So people can go through their entire lives and never think about the poor in rural Burundi. But we're really blessed to, in that case, partner with Dr. Jason Fader, who he and a team of Christian missionaries they're providing really remarkable care to people in that area. I'm thinking about Dr. Tom Katina in the Nuba Mountains. Again, one could go through his entire life and never have heard about the Nuba Mountains, never contemplated the Nuba Mountains. Not Tom. Tom went to the toughest place in the world, which the Nuba Mountains is, and he's bringing first world medical care there. But time and time again, this is what our Christian missionary physician partners do. But it's more challenging than we'd like it to be to raise money because love the stranger's hard. So my wife Erica, she's a rabbi, and one thing we encourage people to do is we say, the Bible tells us, our Torah tells us, you shall love the stranger, and love in the Jewish context is never an emotion; it's always an enacted emotion. Love only exists in action. If you tell your wife you love her but don't do anything to show it, she's not going to think you're very sincere, and she'd be right. So when the Bible tells us to love the stranger, we have to think, what strangers do I want to love, and how can I best do so? And when we ask that question, the answer is so obvious. We want to love the stranger in Africa, the person in rural Burundi or the Nuba Mountains or Uganda or any of the many other places we serve. We'll never know who we are, never know where we're from, may not even heard of the places we're from. It doesn't matter. And the Bible tells us love the stranger. Then we have to ask what's the most effective way to do it, and the answer is through support of the Christian medical missionaries who are on the ground in those places, providing first class medical services to them. So, what I was going to say before is, lots of people have heard the expression "charity begins at home." It's like, yeah, but it doesn't end at home. The Bible tells us to love the stranger. Sure, charity begins at home. Got it, but it does not end at home. We have to love the stranger, and the stranger is by definition not going to be at home. The stranger is going to be somewhere else.
It strikes me, Mark, that you're sort of a mixture of those two things I said at the start when we were exploring that dichotomy. In that, I mean, clearly you have been playing the ball, and you're kind of pragmatist, and you're clearly a problem solver. But you're also guided by some sort of transcendental maxims, or some sort of a code, if you like, which, I guess in your book, if we zoom in there, is what you're saying you get from the Torah. When you say God is right, you get it from the Torah. Now, I want to cosplay an atheist.
By the way, that is so well put. I mean, I am not a spiritual guy. I'm a rational guy. And I mean, Mike, you put it so well. It's like, but what is proper spirituality? Proper spirituality is practicality, right? If I, so I, people say they're spiritual and they'll go on these retreats or whatever. It's like, no, like, how about you be spiritual and you help Tom Katina or Jason Fader or one of the other Christian missionaries that we support to do God's work, which they're doing in providing care for the poor. That's spirituality. And so spirituality is practicality, Mike. That's why I love the way you put it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I was about to declare that I wanted to cosplay an atheist, but maybe that's the wrong term. What I want to do is pose to you a different perspective when we look at your book. Your book says God was right, and the idea is that there's a moral code found in the Torah that can pretty much inform all your decisions, such that they are, they're better, or maybe they're more eudaimonious, whatever you want to call it. What if I say to myself, well, one, I don't think God is real. And as such, I don't think anyone's looking out for me. I need to look out for myself. What would you say to me if I say I want to live a life that's principally about me and watching out for myself, and basically, ultimately a selfish life? If that's the kind of way I'm organizing myself, I mean, what would you say to dissuade me from that kind of behavior?
There are a lot of reasons why not to do it. The first is you're going to be miserable. I mean, the path to happiness is by serving others, we become happy. And we can even drill down even further. By finding, everybody has meaning, everybody can find meaning, everybody has a purpose. And by the way, and how do we know this? I mean, well, God says himself in Exodus, I gave skills to all who are skillful. So everybody has a skill. So therefore, everybody has something that they can contribute if everyone has a skill. So by finding one's meaning and one's purpose and working towards it, people will find happiness. And one's meaning and one's purpose is never going to be the glorification of oneself or the enjoyment of oneself. If one wants to enjoy life, in other words, if one wants to be happy, the clear formula in the Bible and proven by modern social science is you can't pursue happiness directly. You have to pursue meaning and purpose. And by working towards your meaning and your purpose, you will find happiness.
Mm-hmm. So
for people who say God's not real, like I mean, God is the most real entity there is. Now, how do we know? Again, I'm a rationalist. So how do we know that? So in my previous book, which is on how the meaning of life is revealed in the Haggadah, there's a chapter basically proving from a quite rational perspective the realness of God. So how do we know it? The earth, we're only able to exist on Earth. It's something because of the particular configuration of the moons. It was either Saturn or Venus. If they weren't, it were the rings of Saturn, the moons of Venus. If they weren't in exactly the place they're in, like we would be decimated by asteroids. There are dozens and dozens of things like that. The odds of human life existing on Earth, there was this great analogy by one of the scientists, he said that the odds of human life existing on Earth are lower than a tornado roaring through a junkyard and emerging is a Boeing 747. And he just going through the odds of what scientifically has to happen for the world to exist. And then the world to exist, drill even further, for the human body to exist, for all the things that for the sun is the perfect distance from the earth, the moon is the perfect distance from the earth. The perfection of the design of the universe that enables the world to exist, it had to have been fine-tuned. It had to have been intelligently designed. And I go through in the previous book all the different proofs of this, and something like 1 over 1 to the 50th power is considered by mathematicians to be 0. And many of these individual instances, which are dependent on the earth to exist, are effectively 0, and there are many of them. So you multiply one times the other times the other times the other, and you get to something vanishingly close to 0. I mean, like vanishing close to 0. So the world just mathematically, scientifically, had to have been constructed by an intelligent designer. Now, how does one approach that intelligent designer? God? Well, the Torah tells us. It says, I am the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob, to which one has to ask, why the 2 extra ofs? Why not just the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, rather than the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob? And what God is telling us is Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob each approached me in different ways, and I'm going to dignify their approach. I'm going to love their approach by recognizing it singularly. I'm the God of Abraham, of Isaac, and of Jacob. In other words, people approach God in different ways. I call it diversity of approach in the book. So people approach God in different ways. So there's no doubt that God is real. But Mike, you experience God, you relate to God, you pray to God as a Christian. I do as a Jew. It's all good. It's great. God loves diversity of approach. But there's definitely a God.
I mean, I'm tempted to go down that path, but conscious of time, because I'm very fascinated by all of that. I read philosophy at university, and oh gosh, this takes me back. We spent so much time talking about God and whether he's real or not. But what I really want to drill into, kind of as we reach the end of this conversation, is, you write very confidently about the Torah speaking to modern issues and modern problems. And I know someone listening will go, hold on, how could an ancient text say anything to modern issues? I mean, what's your response to that?
Oh, well, first, it's a great question. And I would say just inquire insistently, read the ancient text, and it'll give you answers to questions like, how many times should I date the girl before deciding to marry her? What should I wear in the morning? How many hours a week should I work? These very practical questions are all anticipated, asked, and answered in the Torah. And what I show is modern social science has proved the Torah's answers to these questions to be exactly right and true in every single case.
So how many times should you date this girl?
Well, that's the story of Isaac and Rebekah. So Isaac and Rebekah have the happiest marriage in the Bible. So then you have to ask, okay, it's not a perfect marriage because they have communication problems, but it's the happiest marriage in the Bible without a doubt. And then you have to ask the question, well, how did they decide to marry each other? I mean, how does the happiest marriage in the Bible get started? And it's very simple. The Bible makes it very simple. Why does the Bible make it simple? Because the Bible is a self-help book, and all self-help books can be easily understood. So Abraham sends his servant Eliezer to go find a wife for Isaac. He tells Eliezer, go find a woman in Haran. Why Haran? Because previously in Genesis 15, Abraham had made souls in Haran. So he's basically telling Eliezer, go look for a woman in a good place. So Eliezer goes to Haran, and he meets a woman, and he notices only two things about her. One, that she's, quote, very fair to look upon, so she's attractive. And two, she brings water for him and all of his camels, meaning, or showing us that she is exceptionally generous. So on the basis of those three, and only three characteristics from Haran, attractive and exceptionally generous, Eliezer says, you're the woman for my man Isaac. And then Rebekah is given the choice, do you want to marry Isaac? And Rebekah knows only two things about Isaac. One, that he's wealthy, so he's a good provider. And two, that he loves God, so he has good character. On the basis of those two and only two characteristics, Rebekah says, I will go with you. I will marry Isaac. So what do we learn from that? We learn that how do you pick your spouse? Identify two or three important characteristics, no more, just two or three. There aren't that many to choose from, just two or three. And once someone hits those two or three, go to Genesis 24:67. He married her, she became his wife, and he loved her. The order of that is so important. So what the Bible is telling us is identify two or three important characteristics. Don't think too much about it. Just get married. Then being a spouse must be different than getting married because they're separate clauses. So what would it mean to be a spouse? Probably iterative acts of giving. And then he loved her. So what is the Bible telling us? Identify two or three characteristics. Just get married. Start doing spouse-like things. And then love will follow and continually deepen. Whereas, and the modern social science, like exploring God was right, says this is precisely true. Unfortunately, Western societies are generally going in the opposite direction. Not every sub-community in Western society, many do practice this, but certainly the sub-community that I'm from does not practice this, where eHarmony states that people date for 2.6 years before getting married. So people date before deciding again, that's 2.6 years before they get engaged. They add another 9 or 12 months before they get married. People date for enormous amounts of time. They break up. And by the way, the science has shown that rejection presents itself as physical pain. So people date for huge amounts of time, break up, get rejected, date someone else for huge amounts of time. It just doesn't work. How do we know it doesn't work? Because something like 40 to 42% of couples who do this get divorced. Those divorce numbers are down from the 1980s. Sounds like progress. No, it's only because fewer people are getting married. So you get 40 to 42% divorce. 20% of couples who've been separated for 10 years are not divorced. Why not? Because she needs his health insurance. He wants his Social Security. They don't hate each other. And they don't want to get remarried. So why bother going through the legal process? Warren Buffett did this. And then 7% are chronically unhappy. So the marital unhappiness rate of people who get married the way that the Bible tells us not to is like 65 to 70%.
Well, listen, this is all. I mean, I bet no one listening or watching thought we would end on dating.
Right.
There you go.
Well, so I would encourage all the young people listening, just follow the Isaac and Rebecca model for your own good. And if you're not so young, counsel the younger people who listen to you. Follow the Isaac and Rebecca model. Identify 2 or 3 characteristics. Get married, do spouse-like things, and then get ready to really be in love.
And I want to end, Mark, with one sort of final question. I mean, you were sort of on that trajectory already, which is, you know, the context this podcast is coming out in, which I'm sure you're familiar with, is a massive wonder in this happening amongst young people, young men in particular, who are desperate for purpose, trying to understand who they are run into all sorts of quote unquote strong men who present themselves online as father figures. And I mean, if you could speak to some of those guys for a minute, I mean, what would you say to them, and what could they take from your book?
I would say, what is the purpose? Again, the Bible tells us Moses' whole goal in life is to liberate the Jews from Egyptian slavery and to lead us in the promised land. But Moses never gets to the promised land. So what lesson can we draw from that? Set for yourself a goal that's in service of others that you will not be able to achieve in your lifetime and you'll have to pass on to your children. So it's find a purpose, and that purpose will be in serving others. So Mike, your analogy, it's not going to be some guy who presents himself as physically strong or whatever on the internet. It's going to be find a purpose that says my purpose is ameliorating the pain or saving the lives of others or creating opportunities for the poor. That's my purpose. There are so many ways to do it. I do it through African Mission Healthcare. My wife does it through African Mission, but there's so many ways to do it. So if someone identifies a purpose that is about serving others, they'll find happiness. And I think it's so important that people find that purpose. And faith communities are a wonderful way and place to do so.
Super. Thanks so much, Mark. I hope folks will check out the book, God Was Right, and looking forward to speaking again.
Yeah, me too. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks.